So this is one way that you could share meta. So meta is fact-based. How many overdoses were there in the United States in
Great.
2000?
It seems you're asking about the year 2000 in relation to overdose statistics. Overdose deaths in the U.S. have increased significantly since then. From 2000 to 2020, the number of overdose deaths varied by state, with some states experiencing
How many overdoses were there in the United States in 2002?
Good question. There were 23,518 overdose deaths in the United States in 2002, with a rate of 8.2.
How many overdose deaths in the United States were there in 2000?
There were 17,415 overdose deaths in the United States in 2000, with a rate of 6.2 deaths per 100,000 people. This was a starting point for a growing trend of increasing overdose deaths.
How many overdoses deaths from illicit drugs in the United States in 1999?
Let's see. In 1999, drug overdose deaths in the United States were around 11,000, with a rate of 4 deaths per 100,000 population. Deaths from illicit drugs like heroin and cocaine were significant, but prescription opioid analgesics started to become a growing concern, with a 91% increase in overdose deaths from these substances from 1999 to 2002. Illicit drug overdose deaths specifically for 1999 aren't isolated in the data, but the total number is part of the overall 11.
How many overdose deaths from illicit drugs in the United States in 2024?
Good question. In 2024, the United States saw a significant decline in drug overdose deaths, with an estimated 80,391 deaths, representing a 27% drop from 2023. This marks the largest one-year decline ever recorded, with 30,000 fewer deaths. While the exact number of overdose deaths from illicit drugs isn't isolated, the overall decline suggests a positive trend in addressing the overdose crisis.
How many black people overdosed in the United States in the past 20 years?
Unfortunately, I don't have the exact numbers on overdose deaths among black people in the U.S. over the past 20 years. However, overdose death rates among black Americans have been rising, with a 44% increase from 2019 to 2020. And they've surpassed the rates for white Americans since 2020. In 2023, the overdose death rate for black Americans was 48.9 per 100,000 people, notably higher than the overall U.S. rate.
How many black people overdosed in the United States in the year 2022?
In 2022, The age-adjusted drug overdose death rate for black men was 69 per 100,000, significantly higher than the rate for white men, which was 45 per 100,000. Overdose deaths among black people continued to rise, driven largely by synthetic opioids like fentanyl. The total number of black people who overdosed in the U.S. in 2022 isn't readily available, but the rate suggests a substantial and growing issue.
Can you compare this with the percentages of the population?
To put the overdose rates into perspective, let's look at the population percentages. Black Americans make up around 13% of the U.S. population, but they account for a disproportionate number of overdose deaths. In 2022, black people experienced overdose death rates that were significantly higher than their share of the population would suggest, particularly among men. This disparity highlights the need for targeted interventions and support.
So you're saying that 50% of the overdose in the United States since 2000 was the minority black?
No, that's not what I'm saying. Black Americans do experience a disproportionate rate of overdose deaths compared to their population percentage, but they don't account for 50% of all overdose deaths in the U.S. since 2000. The actual numbers are still concerning, though, with rising overdose rates among black people driven by factors like fentanyl and the drug supply. I'm still here if you need me.
How many overdoses has there been in the United States since the year 2020?
There were 109,000 overdose deaths in the U.S. in the 12-month period ending January 2023. More recent data shows a decline in overdose deaths, with 80,391 deaths occurring in 2024, which is a 27% decrease from 2023. Historically, between 2015 and October 2024, over 800,000 lives were lost to drug overdose deaths in the U.S. The trend seems to be shifting, with a significant drop in deaths recorded, but some regions are still experiencing increases.
From the estimated 800,000 overdoses, how many were white people?
Unfortunately, the exact number of white people among the estimated 800,000 overdose deaths isn't readily available. However, it's worth noting that white Americans experienced a 7% decrease in overdose mortality in 2023, which is a significant trend. To get a more precise answer, further data breakdown would be necessary. The Centers...
How many overdoses of white people in the United States in the year 2020?
Unfortunately, In 2020, there were an estimated 93,331 drug overdose deaths in the United States, which is a 29.4% increase from 2019. Among those deaths, white persons experienced a 22% increase in overdose death rates, with 26,625 deaths recorded that year. This was the highest number of overdose deaths ever recorded in the U.S., with illicitly manufactured fentanyl being a major contributor.
So she didn't say white. 93 in 2020. How many drug overdoses in the United States from illicit drugs in 2020 were minority, non-white?
It seems like you're asking about minority groups in Illinois affected by drug overdoses. While I don't have specific data on Illinois,
How many drug overdoses in the United States from illicit drugs in 2020 were non-white?
in 2020, there were 26,625 drug overdose deaths among white people in the United States, with a rate of 30.7 per 100,000 population. This represents a 22% increase from 2019. The overdose death rate for white persons was the highest among all groups that year. Overdose deaths among white people aged 15 to 24 years experienced the largest relative rate increase at 34%.
So there's 30 or 26 out of 93. 93 in 2020. 26 from 93. $67,000, 70,000, 70,000 minority, no, maybe, so up to 70 non-white minority. So the black population will make up the majority of the minority here, and almost 70,000 in 2020, around 70, whereas 26. So I was estimating earlier that there was approximately 500,000 black Americans. Now, these are legal citizens. These are United States citizens, patriotic. Most of all, everybody's got a few bad apples in the bunch, but so 500,000, maybe since 2000. 500,000 estimated black deaths, maybe. So somebody's occupying space. So that looked pretty good. That was some Republican flatulence. It all gets all tied up and messed up. It's Democratic flatulence.